the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. The office responded that the appropriate place to obtain this information was the Finance Ministry. A subsequent request was therefore sent to the Finance Ministry where the information was provided. Information from the Finance Ministry reveals that government has since 2017 paid judgment debts totaling 125 million cedis. The highest judgment debt was paid in 2018. An amount of 30.9 million cedis was paid to Jubilee Tractors and Assembly Plants Limited. This arose from a case filed against the National Security Council. A close comparison of the various years shows that the highest amount paid since the NPP government took over was in 2017 when payments totaled 54 million cedis. A 2021 research published by the Center for Social Justice shows that this 125 million cedi figure compares nowhere near the whopping 356.6 million cedis debt paid by the NDC administration in 2010. It, however, ranks higher when what was paid in the first 4 years of the John Mahama administration is compared to the first 4 years of the Acquah administration. A total judgment debt of 69.9 million cedis was paid by the NDC administration between 2013 and 2016. President Akufo-Addo's government between 2017 and 2020 paid 120 of the 125 million cedis judgment debts paid so far. 2.8 million cedis judgment debts have so far been paid by government this year.
Coffee in your cup and Joy on the set. The Super Morning Show is always the best bet on Joy 99.7 FM.
So that was Joseph Akable's report, bringing us up to date. Now, in a short while, we'll get the opportunity to speak to him. But I think the details are laid out quite clearly. The sort of the largest amount on record so far since judgment debt became an issue would be the amount of judgment debt paid under former President Atta Mills, where in just 1 year, more than 300 million Ghana cedis was paid as judgment debt. Now, because of that and other judgment debt-related issues, the Justice Acquah Commission was put together under John Mahama. Now, that commission gave out its findings sometime in, I believe, 2014 or 2015. And that's when the term create, loot, and share was first used by Justice Acquah to describe the practice where some government players would collude with other parties, whether individuals or companies, to have a case brought against the state, and then they would ensure the state loses the case, either through not appearing in court or delaying processes, but they would ensure that the state would end up with damages awarded against it in favor of that individual or entity. So when those damages are paid by the state, then the spoils are shared between the entity and that state official or government official. This is what Justice Acquah described as create, loot, and share. And this is the corruption risk that comes with the payment of large amounts of judgment debt. So Joseph Akable is here with us. Now, you put this report together. Hi, Akable. Always good to have you. You put this thing together. You made the request. First of all, why? Why did you want to know about levels of judgment debt payments so far?
I think a bit of the reasons is what you have touched on. A bit of it is what you have touched on already in the introduction about the work that the sole commissioner did. But judgment debt payment was a big deal before 2016. And so even when this government took over sometime in 2019, it came up in Parliament where the minister was asked the question about how much had been paid so far. And at the time, the complaint from the NPP in opposition was that it had become a vehicle for corruption, like you indicated. And so we're interested in, one, getting a breakdown of the payments, because when the minister went to Parliament in 2019, he did not give Parliament a breakdown, even though the question was to the effect that how much judgment has been paid so far. So in his opinion, he was providing with a round figure. And when they asked him who the beneficiaries were, he said he didn't have that information readily available. And so we thought that is something that we would follow up on to do two things. One is to understand it with the historical context to see whether it's on a decline or it's on an increase.
Okay.
And two which is the second layer of the story, which we've not even put out yet. We are going a step further to look at some of these payments individually to understand what may have accounted for those payments and could government have prevented some of those payments in those instances. So that's the second layer that we've not even put out. So the first layer is what we put out, and that had to do with our findings about how much had been paid, how it compares to other administrations. Then again, the discrepancy between the figure we had from the finance ministry as against what the finance minister told Parliament in July 2019.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't want to, force you to give away your second layer if it's not ready. But we are interested in who these payments have been made to. Generally, who are the individuals or entities that have been benefiting from judgment debts?
A number of them. I mean, I can share a bit of some of them with you. I mean, so there's one that involves it's a tractor and assembly plant company. They sued National Security Council, and that resulted in about 30.9 million cedi judgment debts. So that is one. There is one that was also made in favor of NDK Financial Services. That resulted in a payment of 29.5 million cedis. NDK again received another judgment debt of 20 million cedis, just about the same period. And so those are like, you can understand why I'm mentioning those figures. Those are the high figures among the payments. Then there's another NDK one later on. Then
wow,
yeah. So
NDK has won a lot of money from government.
Yes. Then there are some that also went to individuals, mostly either wrongful termination of employment. Those kind of ones are also there. So we have the detailed breakdown, including even what has been paid this year. This year so far, just about 4 judgment debts have been paid. Comes to a total of about 2.8 million cedis, and mainly individual, then a company, and another individual. Yeah.
Now, you also interacted with an organization that we might be hearing from a bit later. They've done their own research into judgment debt. What did you find?
And so their work, Center for Social Justice, it focused on, they did a 20-year span of payment of judgment debts, and their conclusions were very similar to what the sole commissioner found. And they realized that they were mainly occurring because state actors were not defending the state in a manner that they should in some of those instances. In some instances too, their data indicated that there were contract breaches that should or could have been avoided. It was their data that we relied on because they had done the work of compiling what the Auditor General and the sole commissioner had already put together. So that gave us the basis to come to the conclusion that the first term of the Akufo-Addo government, more judgment debt has been paid than was paid in the first and only term of John Mahama. That is the 2012 to 2016 period. But if you compare the Mills one, that is the 2009 to 2012 period, to this current government in the first term, you realize that the Mills period was way more than that. And so we learned that through their work by the data. But they also have concerns about the disparity in the figures as well, and they believe that it doesn't help transparency-wise, especially because it was information that the minister provided to the representative of the people.
What explanation has been given for the disparity? I mean, it's a huge difference between what the finance minister said and what the finance ministry says.
Yeah, so far we've not gotten a clarification on what is accounting for this particular discrepancy, but there's still a layer that we are pursuing together with the second part of the story, and hopefully we'll bring all of that to our listeners.
Okay. I want to bring in Ina-Thalia. He's a fellow at the Center for Social Justice. Ni, good morning. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Now, undoubtedly, there is a reason why you've been looking into judgment debt. The obvious opportunity for corruption through this means is known by all. So what have you discovered? Has that trend of judgments that on the face of it look like we could have either avoided or defended ourselves against, are we still having such judgments made against the state of Ghana?
Good. For us at CSJ, which is a center-left policy think tank, which is more concerned with the social well-being of the people, we think that not a city should go away when that cedi could be directed into education, health, and then social requirements or social improvements of the people. So we think that too much money is going wasted by means of judgment debt. And we thought to look at the reasons behind that. And we realized that three things were key attributes to what the causes of judgment debts are. One is what you call contractual breaches. I mean, why do you go into a contract and then breach the contract? Why, either by omission or commission? Which means that somebody somewhere is not doing its work as it's supposed to do. And we all know that the Attorney General's office, as a representative of the government, is supposed to look critically into all contracts that government goes into. And because government contracts are interministerial related, it means that you don't have a single ministry going into it. So what do we do so that unnecessary blames are not apportioned to this person did not do his work, that person did not do his work? So we feel that the one who is supposed to have the deep eye, the ox eye into our contractual agreements is not doing something good, which ends in those contractual breaches. And then you also talk about statutory breaches, where we fail woefully, and some have even pointed fingers to Parliament, that when you approve those loans for the contract to be done, do you follow up to ensure that the money that you've given, that you have approved, is being used for the purpose that the money is approved for? So statutory breaches are also there. And then you talk about negligence. Okay, so, and as many, or as some would want to put it, it's a create, loot, and share kind of a thing. And we have seen over the 20-year period, I mean, considering that government is a continuum, I mean, you mentioned 2010, the huge figure that is being paid. That debt was created from the previous administration. So, considering that since 1992 to date, it's only the two parties that have been in power, then it means that one creates, one comes to see what it could do, and then the monies are being disbursed. Okay? So it is not good for us. It is not good for us at all as a country. And to answer the latter part of your question, whether something is being done, I don't think that we have seen something being done to that effect. Because as we say, judgment debts are being paid. And we've not seen anything out there. And let me put it on record. It is already on record, but let me reiterate that the Center for Social Justice report on judgment debts was given to the government, okay, was given to the chief of staff. And we got assurance that the ministries concerned will be put together and a discussion going into. And then we'll be invited to help in the further discussion. But that invitation hasn't come, which then suggests that either nothing is done or very little is done. And if we continue the way we're going, and even some of the things that we're saying now, it means that there will be more judgment debts on our head.
Nee, let me ask you this: have you done a breakdown of what percentage of these debts were through negligence, which ones are through, statutory and so forth? Have you done a breakdown of that?
I mean, the point is, you will not be able to know, okay, because they all come in as factors that lead to the judgment debt.
Right.
Okay, so unless you sit with the ministries, and 5 ministries are very key. Okay, if you look at the areas where the judgment debt have accumulated a lot, 5 ministries are key. So unless they are able to come to the round table with us, to put minds and hearts together to look into, you cannot point to one of that. But I can say that all the 3 that I mentioned, contractual breaches, statutory breaches, and then negligence, accounts for the causes of the judgment debt.
Right. Which 5 ministries?
Oh, I mean, mainly the Ministry of the Attorney General, Justice and Attorney General. They are the key because they have the hawk's eye into whatever contract that the government goes into. So that's one. And then a lot also goes into infrastructure. So you'll be looking into housing, you'll be looking into roads. Okay? So let's say these are the very key ones that we can talk, and then you may add health to it, and then education to some extent. Okay. So I mean, not specific, but the key, as I would say, the leading is the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General.
There's also this very strange discrepancy. The finance minister 3 years ago tells us that we're almost at 300 million cedis payments of judgment debt. He even he describes it not only as a figure but also as a percentage, a rather specific percentage, which indicates that he was speaking to details that he had before him. And then 3 years later, the Finance Ministry responds to an RTI request with a figure that is almost half of what the Finance Minister shared, in 2019. So what do you make of that discrepancy, and how does it track against your own monitoring and numbers?
I mean, truth buried shall surely rise, to say. So that, for me, as a fellow of the education pillar at CSJ, Center for Social Justice, that is where my heart beats. Because if we have strengthened our highest level of education, that our highest center of learning, which are our universities, to have what we call the National Research Pool or Portal, where we know that research churned from that portal are nothing but pure academic and national interest, we will not have these arguments today. Because the CIJ's work points to the sole commissioner's report and then the auditor general's report. Okay? And then the investigation from Joy FM points to the RTI. So if the Minister for Information, Minister for Finance, who is supposed to have the first-hand information, is also churning out a different figure, then it tells you the confusion that we have in the space. So for me, I would not hesitate so much, but to say that let's wait for their response. Because we have credited the sources of our information. Joy FM has credited the sources of its information. Let him also come, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. So also point out to us the sources of his information. And then we'll have the balanced view of things to draw a conclusion. But what I'm saying is that if we elevate research, which is the fulcrum of any developed society, then we'll be able to have figures that would not be contested.
So it was actually a campaign promise of the NPP that they would deal with judgment debt and bring down the incidence and occurrence of it. I mean, as a think tank watching that specific area of governance, how do you assess this government's performance?
I mean, the chicken has come home to roost. The world will judge us by what we present to it. I mean, if you make a promise, and every gentleman keeps his promise. I mean, it is said that a gentleman's word must be as sincere as his handshake. So if you say that you're going to do this, then it is expected that you do this. But if you say you're going to do this, and you do otherwise, without telling us the reasons or what accounted for the otherwise, what do you leave us with? You leave us with nothing but to say that you have been untruthful to us. And that is what it has been. Because if you say you're going to fight it, and you have not fought it, and you are not seen to be fighting it, then obviously it leaves us with no other conclusion but to say that you lied to us. And we want to see that true. We want to see that you are doing it. Okay, because that's what they say, and that's what we are judging them by. And it is the same thing as we see with the free SHS. You see, when things emanate out of emotion, when free SHS emanates out of a campaign promise, psychologists will tell you crowd individuation. When people are in the crowd, their attitude and response are different because you want the crowd to cheer on. So when you see the crowd and you are moved to the applause, and you are moved to move and play on the emotions of the crowd, and you make certain promises which you do not intend to keep, as they say in law, nudum pactum. promises that are not meant to be kept, when you know definitely, and by conduct, you show that those promises are not meant to be kept, it becomes problematic for the development of any country. So that when you are saying it, you should know that you have what it takes to solve the problems that you are promising the people.
Right.
But when you promise and you leave it ajar, it is a problem.
Right. I want us to hear the finance minister who spoke in Parliament, I think in 2019. He was answering questions about judgment debt and how much Ghana had paid at the time. Let's hear him.
The government's approach is to renegotiate most of these judgment debts and ensure that we make as much savings as possible and continue to protect the public purse. For example, in one instance, we managed to save the taxpayer some 90 million Ghana cedis through renegotiations. In another instance, we negotiated a savings of 130 million on a claim of over 180 million. In total, we have had no choice but to pay as much as 42% of the outstanding, which is about 283 million cedis, which is approximately 94 million cedis yearly.
The question was for the minister to give us the exact amount that has been paid from 2017 to date. Can the minister specifically tell us how much they paid for the year 2017, 2018, and so far the year 2019? So, Speaker, that was the spirit of the question.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the breakdown, but year-to-date payments, as I mentioned, is 283,256,267 cedis.
So, the finance minister, even though he admitted he didn't have all the details in front of him, he gave a specific figure. First, a percentage of how much of the outstanding debts had been paid at the time. He said it's 42% that has been paid. And he put that 42% at 283 million Ghana cedis. He was asked twice. He said it twice. What did the finance ministry say to us when we made our RTI request?
And so the question that we wanted to find out is how much judgment debts have been paid since 2017 and who those beneficiaries are. And so the ministry responded by referring to our letter and indicating that, so I'm just reading directly. It says, we refer to your request for information under the RTI Act 2019 dated 17th August 2022 and indicate that access to the breakdown on how much judgment debt has been paid since 2017 is granted, and closes the requested information for your attention. And so the attachment is titled Ministry of Finance, Right to Information, Details of Judgment Debt Payments 2017 to 2022. And so what it does is it mentions payments made from 2017 to 2022, then comes to payments made in 2017. So it gives the total for 2017 as 54 million cedis.
54 million cedis for 2017.
Yes.
But we heard the finance minister say in 2019 that they had been paying about 90 million
94 on the average, yeah.
94
on the average.
On the average each year.
Each year, yes.
But the first year here, according to this report,
is 54 million
okay.
cedis. So that's the first year. The second year comes to a total of 35 million cedis.
35 for the second year, not
year.
94.
Not 94.
Okay.
Then for the third year, which is 2019, that comes to 13 million cedis.
13 million
cedis. And he was speaking in 2019. So if you add the three, as at 2019, even though he was speaking mid-year, by end of year, from the figures they've given us, it's 102 million. Nowhere near the 283 that he referred to at that time.
So that figure is just a mystery number.
Yes. And it becomes more difficult to understand when you continue for the subsequent years, 2020, 2021, and 2022, and you come to a grand total of 125 million cedis.
Now, I think what is also important is that he said the amount he was giving us, that 283 million, is 42% of how much we were supposed to pay.
Yes, because if you read the Hansard and go back a little bit, he had made a point that since taking over government, they had received claims from people, that is, people who claim that for one reason or the other, we owe them some money that we have to pay. He said it had come to a total of more than 400 million cedis. And so that's why in the beginning of the sound, he explains that they've been trying to renegotiate some of them, And so far, what they have agreed and paid is just about 40% of the amount of demands that had come in, which was the 400 million.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Listen, before you leave us, Joseph, maybe you can give us a hint. What can we expect in the second phase of this evolving story?
One, answers on the discrepancy that we've noticed, and two, we get additional details on the payments and what had accounted for them in practical terms. What happened? What went wrong? Could anything have been done to avoid them? Those are matters that we'll be finding answers to.
Niama, what should be done about these debts that have already been incurred? What should be done to those responsible? And what can we do to prevent the continuing amassing of debts through judgments against the state?
Good. So let me say that in 2019, when the Minister for Finance appeared in Parliament and gave out those figures and was asked specific questions, which he said he does not have it at hand, we all know that when you present your doctoral thesis and the panel asks you questions or make recommendations, you go back to do corrections and get back to them. So the question is, what has kept us by not being diligent since 2019 to have not provided answers till today? Because, the Honorable House asked you a question, you say you don't have the specific. You could have written to them and say that this is what it is. Okay? So that is what we have to do. Because, when you don't know, you have to go and find out. And when you know, you have to provide it. So, up to today, he still hasn't provided. But we have what we have from the Joy FM research. Then nobody can hold anybody accountable. Even if it comes to explain today, which Mr. Kable is saying will be the second phase, he has come late because it was his duty to have responded when he said at the time that he didn't know. Good. Going forward, what should be the correction? I mentioned the 3 points: contractual breaches, statutory breaches, and then negligence. The onus lies on the accountant, the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General to do a critical work. The quality of eye that goes into scrutinizing the contractual agreement, making sure that very good negotiations are established, making sure that the parties that goes to implement the project sits around the table and have their deliverables and what the KPIs expected from them and be picked as they go along. Our monitoring and evaluation must be strict, and Parliament must also be up and doing. Not only finding the faults, not only approving the loans, but also following up to ensure that whatever they approved, those monies to be done are also done. Okay, so the institutions must be strengthened. The institutions must give us a posture and must act in the interest of the country and not in the interest of individuals or a few group of people. If we begin to do that and also have the passion, the pain of our people who cannot find potable water to drink, who cannot have decent classrooms to study, yet they have to write the same national exams with children sitting in air-conditioned classrooms, who cannot have good hospitals, we have to be pained by the difficulties those people go into. If we have them in our minds, knowing that they are extension of our family, we know that when one person or a few group of people are collecting it all, it hurts the other people.
I think that's a very well made point. Mr. Nia-Ama-Adi is a fellow at the Center for Social Justice. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. This judgment debt matter, obviously it's an evolving story, so there'll be more to come, as Joseph Acquah has indicated. There's a lot to think about. There are those who are also suggesting that, look, sometimes it's necessary to cancel that contract because perhaps the contract in its form is costing the state more than a new contract would. And so it becomes important to calculate the cost of cancelling it and, the judgment debt you would pay, put that against how much money you could save with a new contract. And sometimes the state will be better off with a new contract. Okay, my question is, how do you know? How do you know that it will be cheaper? Because these are judgment debts. Okay, it's not compensation that is voluntarily paid by the state. It's a judgment that is handed down by a court. at the end of a lawsuit brought to the court by the person with whom you've cancelled the contract. So how do you know at the time you are cancelling the contract how much judgment, how much the court will judge that you must pay? How do you know? For which reason you can calculate that cancelling the contract will be cheaper than keeping it. How do you know? Okay, let's think about those things as we take a break. When we come back, we are going to Ellembelle, where Galamsey has suddenly created magicians among us who can make an entire excavator disappear before your very eyes. The DCE there is going to court this morning. He's being charged with some crimes. When we come back, we'll find out more.
Some institutions touch lives, leaving lasting impressions, and are never forgotten. GCB, your biggest and largest bank in Ghana, is rewarding customers who activate their inactive accounts this season. From now